Guys, welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to code the ranged enemy. Alright, let's jump right into it. So, our ranged enemy basically is going to follow the player around, and every so often he'll be shooting these enemy bullets at the position of the player. So the first thing we need to do is set up the ranged enemy and the enemy bullet with the components that we need. So we've already done this a couple of times, so I'm going to go a little bit faster. So on the ranged enemy, the first thing we have to add is the box collider 2D. Then press the edit collider button and shape it as you like. Okay, after that we're going to add the rigid body 2D component. I'll set of course the gravity scale to 0 and add the freeze rotation on the Z axis. I'll then give him the enemy tag and also the enemy layer. Alright, so now I'll select the enemy bullet and I'll also add a box collider 2D to it. And I'll make this one here trigger. Then I'll press the edit collider button and shape it. Perfect. Once that's been done, I will drag and drop my ranged enemy and my enemy bullet inside of the prefabs folder. I can now just delete the enemy bullet from the scene because we don't need it right now. And I'll select the ranged enemy and I'll create and add the ranged enemy C# script. I'll then open it up and begin coding. Alright, the very first thing we need to do is derive from the enemy script. Then we want the ranged enemy to follow the player around. So, like usual, I'm going to create the public float stop distance variable. I'll then create my void update function. In here, I'll first check if the player is not equal to null, and then I will check if the vector2.distance between our current position and the player.position is greater than the stop distance. If it is, then we want to move towards the player, so I'll say transform.position is equal to vector2.move towards. I'll pass in our current position again, so transform.position. The target position is player.position, and we want to move at the speed multiplied with time.delta time. Awesome. Alright, so that should make a ranged enemy follow the player around. Now we want him to shoot his bullets. So we're going to be using animation event. So first of all, I'm going to create my private float variable called attack time, which will store the exact time where we are allowed to attack again. Then right underneath my if statement, I'm going to create another if statement, checking if the current time in the game is greater or equal than the attack time. If it is, we'll set the attack time back to the current time in the game, plus the time between attacks variable. And now we want to play our attack animation. So first of all, I need to come up here and create a private animator variable to have access to the animation functions, and I'll call it anim. Then inside of our void start function, we then need to set anim equal to the animator component that is attached to our ranged enemy. Alright, perfect. Remember, there's one thing we have to do. We have to make the start function public and add the override keyword so they override the main enemy start function. But of course, we still want to have access to the player, so we'll call the base.start function so that the code inside of the enemy start function still gets called. Alright, awesome. Once that's been done, I can now say anim.setTrigger, and we called it attack. Alright, so now let's go back inside of Unity and set up the animation event. Alright, so here inside of Unity, I'm going to select my ranged enemy, open up the animation tab, and I'll select the attack animation. Now I'll just slide my selector to the moment where he opens his mouth, and I'll press the add animation event button. Now all we have to do is go back inside of our C# script and create the ranged attack function. Right underneath the update function, I'll create the public void ranged attack function. Alright, so this enemy here will be shooting his bullets from a certain shot point, so we have to create that variable. So up here, I'm going to create a public transform variable called shot points. Now inside of our ranged attack function, we need our shot point to rotate towards the player. So we already did that code inside of the weapon script, so I'll just copy all this code here, calculating the new rotation. I'll then go back inside of my ranged enemy script and paste it right here. Alright, so the first thing we are doing is we're calculating the direction. So let's remove this here because that is not valid anymore. And we want to calculate the direction between the player dot position and our shot point dot position. These two lines right here could stay exactly the same, and instead of changing our rotation, we want to change the shot point dot rotation to be equal to the new rotation that we just calculated. Alright, now all we have to do is instantiate the bullet. So to do that, I'm going to come up at the top and create a public game object variable, and I'll call it enemy bullet. Then back down here, I will instantiate the enemy bullet at the shot point dot position and shot point dot rotation. Alright, perfect. Now let's save the script and we can test all this out inside of Unity. Alright, so here inside of Unity, we have to fill in our variables. So I'll choose 3 for the health. I'll give him a speed of, let's say, 17. Time between attacks, I will choose 4 seconds. For damage, well, he doesn't attack the enemy himself, so we could just put 0 for that. The stop distance will give something like 25. The shot point, so we have to create the shot point now. So underneath the ranged enemy, I'm going to create a empty game object, and I'll just call it shot point. We can now drag and drop the shot point onto his respective slots, and then I'll drag and drop my enemy bullet prefab for the enemy bullet. Of course, we also have to remember to select our animation event and choose our ranged attack function from our dropdown. Now let's press the play button and test all this out. So as you can see, he is instantiating the bullets at the correct rotation every so often. Alright, so the last thing we need to do is to add a script to the enemy bullet so that they move forwards and can deal damage to the player. So I'll just select the enemy bullet prefab and I'll add a new C# script called enemy bullets. So inside of this script, we're first of all going to create a private player variable and we'll call it player script. This is the variable that we will use to deal the damage to the player. Next off, we're also going to create a private vector2 variable called target position. Alright, so now let's create our start function. In here, I'm going to set the player script equal to the game object that has the tag of player, and then I'll fetch the player script on that object. I'll then set the target position equal to the player script dot transform dot position. Then inside of the void update function, I'll check if the distance between our current position and the target position is greater than a very small number. So let's choose like 0.1. So if the distance is greater than 0.1, then we want to move towards it. So I'll say transform position equals vector2 dot move towards, and we want to move towards, so from our transform dot position to the target position, and we have to create a speed variable. So let's come up here and create a public float speed variable, and we'll just put that inside of here. This should be coming very familiar to you, and we're going to multiply it with time dot delta time. Awesome. Then we'll add the else statement. So if we have reached our target position, then I simply want to destroy the game object. Okay, the last thing we need to do is detect collisions. So for that, I'm going to use the void on trigger enter to the function. Then I'll simply check if the collision has the tag of player, and if it does, then we want to say player script dot take damage, and then we have to pass in our damage amount. So I'm going to create that variable as well. I'll say public int damage, and I'll pass in that variable inside of our function. And then finally, we want to destroy the game object also. Awesome, so this should all be working. So let's save our script and test it all out inside of our game engine. Right, perfect. So for the speed, I'll choose something like 40, and I'll give it a damage of 1. Now let's press the play button. Awesome, so this is working correctly. As you can see, the bullets are moving forward. Okay guys, that marks the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we have finished officially all 3 of our enemies. Great work. I'll see you soon.